Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Test Those Breasts podcast. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn. I'm a retired teacher of 20 years and a breast cancer thriver turned staunch, unapologetic, loud supporter and advocate for others, bringing education and awareness through a myriad of medical experts, therapists, caregivers, and other survivors. A breast cancer diagnosis is incredibly overwhelming with the mounds of information out there, especially on Dr. Google. I get it. I'm not a doctor, and I know how important it is to uncover accurate information, which is my ongoing mission through my nonprofit. The podcast includes personal stories and opinions from breast cancer survivors and professional physicians, providing the most up-to-date information at the time of recording. Evidence, research, and practices are always changing, so please check the date of the recording and always refer to your medical professionals for the most up-to-date information. I hope you find this podcast a source of inspiration and support from my guests. Their contact information is in the show notes, so please feel free to reach out to them. We have an enormous breast cancer community ready to support you in so many ways. Now let's listen to the next episode of Test Those Breasts. Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn, and today I am so honored to have my guest, Dave Catron, on my show. Dave is a retired firefighter and breast cancer survivor. He dedicated 29 years to the fire service, along with years of service in search and rescue and the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District Auxiliary. After retirement, he continued working as a firefighter in television and film. Dave has also been actively involved in community service, including volunteering at events and contributing to local projects in the Reno area. Well, Dave, welcome to the show. I am so honored that you're here. I'm so glad that we met and had such a nice conversation a couple of weeks ago before we were going to go ahead and record. How are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you for having me, by the way. This is out of the blue, and it kind of made me nervous to say yes.
Well, and I think that our audience will come to understand why you might be nervous and why this is such a big deal. So we have a mutual friend of ours, and actually she is on my board of Test Those Breasts, that connected me to you. And I was so happy to be able to talk to you because it's not every day that we talk to someone who is male and had breast cancer. And one of the focuses that Test Those Breasts has is to make sure that we are including men in the fold because men get breast cancer too. And there are so many people who do not even know that. But here's the thing. We all have breasts and we can get breast cancer. So I just really appreciate your willingness to have this conversation, tell your story, because it is important to amplify. But before we start really getting into your diagnosis, I would love for you to share with our audience, who was Dave before breast cancer even was on your radar, before you were diagnosed?
I was the kind of guy that would take on any project. I didn't even have to be asked. I usually look for something to do. One of the big ones, near and dear to my heart, was the R that's on the Peavine Mountain. I heard about it when I was in Cub Scouts back in the 60s, and I'd always been asking and reaching out to see if anybody knew where it was, how big it was, give me an idea. And I happened to be out riding motorcycles with a friend of mine in the late 80s, in 1988, and we spotted it. And so over the winter of 88 and 89, I was able to get 315 gallons of white latex donated by some of the local paint shops. And I needed help, so I got a hold of my buddies with Washoe County Search and Rescue, and there was 15 of us. We went up there with string mops and buckets, slopped it on there, and it was just so exciting to see it. The news got wind of it. They probably saw us up there. In fact, my brother was up near Peavine Mountain, and my pager went off, and he goes, "You missed something on the right." So all the way across the valley, he's telling me, go fix it,
You need
The
to get that
media
little
thought
spot.
it was pretty cool. Yeah.
That
It was a
really
big
awesome.
deal.
I love that. And I don't know how much if my audience knows, I live in Reno, Nevada. So that story is like a very nostalgic to me because I lived over in the Northwest Reno and we actually live below the N and we still do actually to this day. But I know that R and I went to high school here and so thank you for telling that story because I love fun historical stories
Yeah.
like that about Reno. So you were involved in a lot of projects, you were active. What was your firefighting days like?
Oh my gosh, it was like a dream come true. It was one of those things that every little kid wants to be a baseball player or a fireman. I was lucky enough to be a fireman. I mean, it was hard work. Reno got locked up with a lawsuit because of their hiring practices. So they didn't hire for a long time, but that gave me the opportunity to get some experience. And that's when I got on the Truckee Meadows Auxiliary. I had 62 fires under my belt by the time I went in for my interview. And that was a lot more than some of the guys I was interviewing with. And so I was pretty busy doing that. I went back to get my fire science degree. Didn't quite complete all the classes because I got busy with other things. I became an EMT intermediate. I was in the very first class of intermediates. It's like started off with EMT and then EMT2 and then paramedic. I was a 2, which they changed the name to I for intermediate. And we could start IVs and intubate. And we had a handful of drugs that we could give people. So we now had a real profound effect on the outcome of somebody's life. And it was big for me. It changed my life when I got involved as an intermediate. Then I got involved in the technical rescue team, which it was the very first team with Truckee Meadows Fire. So it was kind of cool to be in on the inception of that. The training was a blast. I mean, it was something I just loved going to work every day. And I think that drove my wife nuts. But I loved my job so much that on my first day back, I couldn't wait to get to the firehouse.
Well, that's really cool. And it's cool that you had the skills and the power to save people's lives. Tell us all the things about when you were diagnosed, how your breast cancer was found, first of all.
I found it. I was 60, so it was 10 years ago. And I started feeling a little tenderness in my left nipple area. And when guys ask me, what does it feel like? For me, it felt like when I was a young kid and my parents would take us to the swimming pool or to the beach and we had styrofoam kickboards. And being on that all afternoon without a t-shirt on, it made things kind of raw and painful. And that was the exact same pain. It was only on one side. So I did a little Googling to find out what's going on. And it first kept saying, well, it could be, if I pronounce this right, gynecomastia, I believe is how it's pronounced. It's very common with men. It'll go away on its own. Some have it removed. No big deal. But it said if you start to get a dimpling, you're in trouble. And so I watched it for a while. This was back in like April. And I got my official diagnosis in June, but I knew about it in like April because I started getting the dimpling. And I went in for an annual physical with my doctor. I kind of moved it up a little bit. And I said, I think I've got breast cancer. And he's like, oh, no, no. So he's doing the calm and reassure, which I've done all that myself. But he was concerned as well. And I said, I need a mammogram. And he said, you're definitely getting a mammogram. So off I go. And everything took a month and it was driving me nuts.
Yeah.
But I did have my mammogram in like July. And so
The
it came
waiting.
back.
The
Yeah,
waiting is ridiculous.
pick up the pace, people.
So I think it's really important for our audience to understand that when I was diagnosed at 54, I didn't know there were 12 signs of breast cancer. And now that I'm a breast health educator, I absolutely let everyone know that. And one of those that I did not know was the dimpling. And so, there's rash, discharge from the nipple, 12 different signs, right? So you are very interesting because you were able to advocate for yourself in a world that men don't get breast cancer. What are you talking about? Or, oh, that's not breast cancer. You went
Yeah.
in and you said, I think I need a mammogram. Most men do not know to even ask for that. What is it that made you realize that?
I think it's my background in the medical field. I've seen a lot of weird stuff. And so I kind of expected the unexpected. And
Okay.
so when I knew something wasn't quite right, sure, this felt like an old injury that I would get on a paddleboard, but I haven't been doing that. Even though we live near the beach, I don't go to the beach. I'm more of a mountain guy. I could care less that I live near the ocean now. But I'm having that same pain. What's going on? So when it said if you start get the dimpling, you probably got a tumor in there. So
Right.
I knew what was
Okay.
going on.
So, what were you diagnosed with? What type of breast cancer, and what were your treatments like?
This was invasive ductal carcinoma. It was stage 2, and I believe it was stage 2A. I've
Okay.
looked through all of my notes. I've got all my records because I wound up walking away at one point. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I told him I wanted all my records, and so I'm kind of thumbing through. And the treatment was I'm triple positive.
Okay.
So I'm hormone positive and HER2 positive. So I was treated with the typical chemo drugs. As a matter of fact, the physician, the oncologist, she said, they have a panel of doctors that sit down and they discuss your treatment plan. She doesn't do it by herself. So when she told me we didn't quite know how to treat you, so I threw everything we had at you. So not only did I get a full course of the chemo drugs, I got the Herceptin as well to treat the HER2. So three treatments, 3 infusions, the bills are coming in. And my wife, bless her heart, she's trying not to tell me, but we came in and sat down at the computer, and she does all the bookkeeping and all the bills because she's so good at it. She said, I think we owe close to $100,000. And I'm freaking out. Turns out she was wrong. It was $200,000. So I discussed this with my oncologist, and she kind of threw her hands up and said, I have nothing to do with that. You've got to talk to UCLA. And so I got on the phone and called them, and everybody's just passing the buck. It's like, well, it's the way it is, pal. Look, I gave you my insurance cards on such and such a date, and you said, you've got great insurance. You're fine. I believed them. I was actually out of network because we moved from Reno to Southern California. And truthfully, I didn't know what network was. And so when they explained to me I was out of network, it would have been something that would have been nice to know before I committed with them. And so they're only paying a fraction of what the bills are adding up to. And it was getting ridiculous, and they wouldn't budge. And so I just said, I'm not going to leave my wife bankrupt because chemo's not a 100% cure all. So I walked away. And my insurance company, everybody hates insurance. I happen to love
Yeah.
these guys. They bent over backwards behind the scene. I didn't know what was going on, but one gal called me up and she said, you got to get back into chemo. And we chatted, and she said, I've hired a negotiator, and he's been working every day trying to convince the guy at UCLA that you don't have the kind of insurance that he thinks you do. So stop trying to charge him for everything. I mean, even the new Lasta patches were like $25,000 a piece. Insurance isn't
So,
picking it up.
were you getting denial letters?
We got bills. I
Okay.
didn't get denials.
So,
We were
but
getting the bills.
what was their reasoning for not paying for it?
They only paid what is usual and ordinary, I believe is the term. And that's all they pay.
So,
And
if it
for
was
what my
let
insurance was, being out of network,
so let me ask you something. If I'm just curious if it had anything to do with that you're a man, if it were a woman, would that have changed? Would that have been different?
well, no, it's
Okay.
because we were out of network. The only thing that was different is while I was getting EOBs, the
Yep.
explanation of benefits or something like that,
Yep.
they were coding me as a female. And so I called the nurse navigator and I said, can you at least tell me who these people are? Because it's got the name of the billing company and there's no phone number. I have no way of contacting these people. Can you tell me how I can get a hold of them so they can rebill it? Not a female, I'm a male. They're coding it wrong and it's going to get denied. And it did. And that's so hard to unwind that stuff.
Yeah.
And it
Yep.
wasn't everybody, but it was a few people. It was like the radiology people. I didn't know who they were. I don't know if the anesthesiologist did it too, but there was a couple of people that were coding it as a female.
Yeah.
So
And everything you probably got from the medical providers were all probably revolving around females, right? There was nothing
Absolutely.
that was geared towards men. Yeah, and that is one of the things. Recently we have both been connected to Jake Messier, who I just interviewed. He has quite a presence online for the breast cancer community. He has metastatic breast cancer. One of the things that he was saying is that every single thing that he was given, all the pamphlets, everything, they were all geared towards women and nothing to do
Yes.
with men. Yeah. So that's frustrating. So you went through the treatment, you had the chemo, you had the medication, and you were told at some point that there was no evidence of disease. Yes?
That's, yeah, towards the end, there's a lot of things that happened before that. I mean, I did walk away. They fixed everything with UCLA. I came back into it, but I have to go to a different lab, infusion lab. I can stay with the same oncologist, but now I'm living in San Juan Capistrano, so I'm going to an oncologist 20 minutes away. Now I got to drive an hour and a half to get to LA and commuter traffic to finish the chemo portion of it. So I've got 3 more sessions up there. And then I could come back to a different lab for the Herceptin to finish out the year.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah. This is the big one. When I hit the 1 year mark from diagnosis, I had my first mammogram to determine that I do have breast cancer. So at the 1 year mark, my oncologist wants me to go back for my first annual mammogram. So I go in, and the tech, she says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "My oncologist sent me in for a mammogram." She goes, "We don't give men mammograms willy-nilly." So this isn't willy-nilly. I've been treated for breast cancer for the last year. She said, "Men don't have breasts." I said, "You need to go read a book on your next break." And
Shame
so the
on her.
conversation started getting a little, absolutely, those are probably some of the words I use and more. So the conversation got loud. The radiologist came in, and he backed her up 100%. He said, "I'm not giving you." He said, "Are you crazy?" He said, "Those things are hot. They will cause cancer. You found it the first time." He said, "Just pay attention." I said, "Well, wait a minute. Do you tell this same story to women with small breasts, that this could kill them? It'll cause cancer?" And he wouldn't answer. So I said, "You better go talk to my oncologist. You better call her, because she sent orders in, and your tech won't give me a mammogram." And so he got on the phone, and I could hear him in the hall. They were going back and forth. It got ugly. They did wind up giving me the mammogram, but he said, "No more." He says, "I'll do it this one time."
That is
It
so frustrating. That is so frustrating, Dave. I'm really sorry that you had to go through that. And just the mere fact that she said the words in willy-nilly and that mammograms cause breast cancer, that's pretty scary. I wonder what their thoughts are
I
now.
wanted. I Googled it to see if he was telling the truth, and I can't find anywhere where it says that mammograms
It's not
do
true.
that.
Well, people say things about. I just had an interview with Dr. Robin Roth. She is a breast radiologist. If you're not following her, you should follow her. She wrote a children's book called "Everyone Has Boobies," and so we talk about how all mammals have boobies, and to make it so that it's not so uncomfortable for kids to know their bodies and all of that. But we talked about that on the interview, and she said that people think that because there's radiation that it causes breast cancer. But one of the things that she said to me was, if that is the case, we have a huge surge in younger women getting breast cancer in their 20s and 30s who have never even had a mammogram. So, how do we explain that? And she said, anything that we do in our lives has radiation. And she said, so when you're going in for an annual mammogram, it saves more lives than anything. So, it is just not
Yeah.
true. And so, we're constantly fighting that myth. And yeah, anyway, so okay, you also ran into some issues with some therapy, right? You went into a couple places to get some services, and you were denied or turned away.
When I sat down with the nurse navigator just after my diagnosis, she's going through this big binder of all the programs that are out there, and talking about lymphedema and things like that. She also got to a point where she said, "And as a breast cancer patient, there's a Tai Chi class that you're welcome to go to. It's for all breast cancer patients. And it kind of helps you get through, the ups and downs of the therapy, because you get beat up pretty hard. And it helps you get either keep your strength or get your strength back towards the end. And she goes, just show up. You don't even have to ask. And so I showed up. And I was met at the door by some lady who's involved there. And she said, this is for women. I said, no, it's for breast cancer patients. I said, I've seen the paperwork. It's for anybody who has breast cancer. She goes, nope, this is for women only. We have to protect the women, so no men allowed. I said, protect them from what? So she turned me around. I went back, called the nurse navigator, and she said, this is the American Cancer Society's program. You need to call them. So I did. I was very polite, talked to number 1, number 2, number 3. I get to number 4. Tell her the same story, and she tells me that she's the supervisor and she makes these decisions, and no, it's for women only, period. I said, let me get the correct spelling of your last name, because as soon as we get off the phone, I'm going to call Robin Roberts with Good Morning America. She's been down this road, and she's going to probably give you a phone call. And so she starts panicking, and she said, I tell you what, I will give you a one-time okay, you can go in and take this Tai Chi class. And I said, not good enough. What about the next guy? And the guy after him? I said, it's got to be open to everybody. If you're going to offer it to breast cancer survivors and patients, everybody. And I got kicked out again, so I just dropped it. October, so a few months later, I'm at the mall, and October, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. There's always a booth at the mall. And so I just kind of went over there, and I'm looking to see if there's anything that talks about male breast cancer. And there isn't. So I said something to one of the women. She said, well, we don't really bother putting those out because it's so rare. It's not that big of a deal. I said, it is that big of a deal. I have breast cancer. I'm battling it right now. I said, you have no brochures. You don't tell anybody about it. And so she says, call the American Cancer Society. So I called them again. And I said, I would like to volunteer at the booth. And I said, I don't want to work on the table and talk to the women that come up. I want to be back a little bit wearing my pink fire department t-shirt and talk to the boyfriends and the husbands, fathers, whatever, and make sure they understand that men can get breast cancer too. Just kind of work the crowd. She goes, absolutely not. We don't want to talk about that. We don't want to scare the women away. Now I called Robin Roberts. I didn't do it the first time, but this time I said, we've got to get the word out. So I didn't get to talk to Robin, but I talked to her assistant, and I had reached out to a Facebook group called Male Breast Cancer Coalition, and I was part of that for a while, and they had some fabulous information. There was a 17-year-old kid. His mom started this program, so I got a hold of them, got their information, shipped it off to Robin Roberts. 2 days later, during October, they had a whole segment on male breast cancer, and they interviewed this lady and her son, and kind of opened the doors. And ever since then, there's always some chatter about male breast cancer. So it's good to finally get somebody talking about it.
Definitely. And kudos to you for making that happen. I think that every little bit that we do together is going to does make a difference. When we had our pre-interview, you talked about how this really affected your mental health. And breast cancer, or any cancer for that matter, really does affect our mental health. I mean, I definitely went through some dark periods for a variety of reasons. But tell us about how that affected you.
Even though I kind of knew what was coming, even when I went to my primary care physician, it was still kind of a punch in the gut the day I got the biopsy read to me. So when we went home, I told my wife I want to go for a bike ride. So I jumped on my road bike, and it's like 2 or 3 miles down to the beach. And it's on a bike path. And the first red light I get to on the whole ride, my head is just spinning. I fell off my bike right in the crosswalk. I forgot to unclip from my pedals. I'm teary-eyed. I'm just sad. And I'm laying there in the crosswalk on the verge of crying. And I finally kick out of my pedals, and everybody's staring at me like I'm the buffoon, but I don't really care about that. The whole process of having this, I learned through the fire service, keep from going crazy, because you see a lot of really bad stuff, and you've got to continue on. You've got to go to the next call. You process it and move on. And there's some you can't get rid of, but most of the calls I can go ahead and deal with them and just put them on the shelf. and move on to the next one. And I found that's what I did with my breast cancer. Even though every time I turned around, I was getting punched in the gut because I'm a guy and treated like a freak and denied services for stuff. I got through it, but it's because I kind of put it on the shelf. I didn't dwell on it. I was sad. I wanted to get through it. But once it was over for me, it was kind of over. I did get involved with Firefighter Cancer Support Network. Any firefighter, any guy that's a firefighter in the country gets a phone call from me if he's got breast cancer. There's mentors that reach out to all different types of cancer, and there's females that deal with the female breast cancer survivors. But I'm on the crew that calls the guys and chat with them and kind of let them know what's around the next corner. And that kind of helps me that it's still going down that road again and opening up those doors. And then when you reached out, like, oh, I don't want to do this again. But I did, and I'm happy to be here. I think it's going to help me, especially watching Jake's videos every morning.
Yeah, he's pretty cool. Let's talk about Jake. You're in your survivorship. You get this, introduction with me, and we start pulling all this out of you. And it really started making you think about a lot of stuff. But you're connected to Jake. Tell us your experience about Jake and what that has done for you.
I was intimidated in the beginning because he's so good. He can talk. He's just dynamic, and just to listen to him, he's entertaining for me anyway. Just to listen to him, and he's not a downer at all. He's very informative, and he's driven. Bless his heart, he's doing something I couldn't do, and I kept thinking I can't do that. And then I started reading his bio, and I realized this guy's got a background.
He does.
He was in journalism. He was a radio DJ and stuff. It's like, I can't do that. So I'm cool with it because he's one of a kind. He's really special.
Yeah, he's really fun to talk to. Yeah, he's got this 30-year background in marketing and specifically with nonprofits. And same thing, like I was intimidated by him too. It's like, I wish I could do that. Like I have a presence on social media, but he's got like, I don't even know, 30,000 followers or something like that. And mine's very grassroots. So I just kind of play around and try to have a presence with videos and educational materials. And I always put out video clips of my podcast episodes and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a pretty talented guy. But more importantly, he has been able to break barriers with organizations. They never spoke about breast cancer for men. One of my best friends' husbands had breast cancer. And I remember them telling me one time they were at an event, a breast cancer event. Men were not celebrated or even mentioned at all. And they were very disappointed. And it's really some of the smaller organizations like mine who are talking about it and who are getting other people to talk about it. But Jake, he actually was able to break a barrier, and he's on a committee with them, I guess right now, as the male breast cancer survivor. He was able to start getting them to talk about it. And that's a big deal because I think he said there were about 3 organizations in the United States who talk about breast cancer. I know one is his breast cancer and Harvey. And I interviewed Harvey a couple of years ago, and I met him in person in December. And so they're in connection. And there's another guy floating around out there who just started following me, and I'll probably interview him too. But it's really organizations like grassroots organizations who are really starting to talk about it. I mean, really talking about it and interviewing people to make sure that people understand that, yes, women, their statistics are a lot higher than, 1 in 8 women, but that should not negate the need to talk about male breast cancer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jake is educated too. He's done a lot of research, and when he starts talking, he knows what he's talking about. I just kind of repeat the nonsense that I read 10 years ago. I mean, I give a little 2-minute spiel at the golf course if someone sees my bracelet. If someone says, "Does your wife has breast cancer?" I say, "No, her husband does." And that usually starts the conversation.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, and
yeah,
it's also letting It's also letting men know because they don't know. I'm a Lemonista with Know Your Lemons. That's used their curriculum to teach breast health classes. And several of us have said we need to include more information about men because there is a little quiz in there that talks about, men can get breast cancer, true or false.
Jake said something in one of his podcasts a few weeks ago about his oncologist and someone else did a paper together about male breast cancer and how it's treated. And like, are they doing it wrong? They're not really 100% sure if they should be treating us the same way that they
Right.
treat women. They
Right.
just don't know. But they're going to start heading down that road a little more, I think, now.
Yeah.
Especially if he's on the board with Komen.
Yep. And he has a seat at the table, which is really awesome. And also, with AI and everything, they're starting to really have individualized treatments for everyone. And so it just makes sense for the studies, the research to really help with the kind of treatment that men should be having for whatever kind of breast cancer they get. So I'm just really glad that we were able to connect and we were able also to talk about, what you went through, how people treated you, how the insurance companies treated you, and hopefully moving forward, you can get a sense that there is a community of brotherhoods and sisterhoods out there alike, and that we are all in this together, and partnerships are super important. We're not all on our own islands. That, when I got breast cancer, Dave, one of my friends told me, oh my God, Jamie, you just wait. It is the sisterhood of all sisterhoods. And she was right. I mean, it's huge out there. But little did I know there's a brotherhood out there as well. And I think that the more we work together, the better,
Yeah, the sisterhood wouldn't let me play. I tried to get involved in all the different support groups. And there was some local support groups in Southern California. And it's like, absolutely not. I said, come on, this isn't a show and tell. I just want to know what's around the next corner. What kind of medications are they going to throw at me? How do you deal with it? What to expect?
I would like to ask you one last question before we wrap up. Do you have a particular piece of advice that you would give to someone, specifically a male, who has never been diagnosed with breast cancer and may never be diagnosed, obviously, but what kind of a piece of advice can you leave for our audience?
Pay attention to your body. Your doctor doesn't know your body as well as you do. I couldn't feel a lump. The first thing I started doing was feeling for something, but I knew something was wrong. And you've got to reach out, because if you don't, you're going to wind up in the late stages by the time it gets that bad. You got to catch this early. It's a big deal. It doesn't heal itself. So you've got to go after it somehow. Pretty much just pay attention to what's going on with your body and reach out for help and support. I walked away when all the females turned me down. I didn't like the male group on Facebook, and then I just stopped looking, and I probably should have stuck with it and find someone. I'm pretty happy that the Firefighter Cancer Support Network is out there. I'll continue to talk to these guys because they'll even get their wives on the phone when I call, because they're curious. What in the world are we looking at? It's not the end of the world. So just try to cheer them up a little bit.
Yeah. And the thing is that, if you have breast cancer, it's going to be there whether you look or not, or you get it checked or not. And I think that a lot of men, and I'm sure women out there too, because we get so busy and ignore our bodies. But men, I can probably see that they would be feeling around and thinking it's nothing. Especially when you start seeing things like an inverted nipple or a rash on your nipple. So it's important to go check. So that's a really great piece of advice, and I appreciate that. Well, Dave, is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up today?
No, I'm happy you kind of pulling me out of my shell a little bit. I think it's going to help me. So
Good. Good. I'm so glad. My job here is done. No, I'm just kidding. It's not done, but I'm just glad that I can be a piece of your life and hear your story and amplify your story. And I just appreciate, again, your opening up and telling us all the things. And to my audience, I really appreciate you joining us again. And we will see you on the next episode of Test Those Breasts. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Friends, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I hope you got some great, much needed information that will help you with your journey. As always, I am open to guests to add value to my show, and I'm also open to being a guest on other podcasts where I can add value. So please reach out if you'd like to collaborate. My contact information is in the show notes. And as a reminder, rating, reviewing, and sharing this podcast will truly help build a bigger audience all over the world. I thank you for your efforts. I look forward to sharing my next episode of Test Those Breasts.